All right, welcome to Comfortably Uncomfortable. You've got Sandy and Alex here, and we are here to empower women to choose courage over comfort by getting comfortably uncomfortable. We get real and cut through the bullshit. Are you ready to get a little weird? Because we're going to laugh, sweat, cry, and grow together.
No topic is going to be TMI. Well, maybe for me, but not for Sandy. We complement each other in that way. Okay, so are we ready?
Well, yeah, duh, I am, but are you?
Okay, let's go.
The one with the breath. You can get a lot with just like an exhale, a sound. It's called pranayama in yoga. We need it to live. And it's like the first thing when we're born that we want to make sure our babies have, which, if you didn't know, cool little fact, that first breath you take when you're born, you actually close a hole that you have in your heart. And that's why sometimes we say that babies are born with like a hole in their hearts, because at that breath, that hole that transfers blood from one ventricle to the other isn't closed. So that first breath even is so important to us.
I never knew that.
Isn't that cool?
I never knew that. That's very cool.
So breathing, cool. Breath, that's what we're going to talk about today, right, Alex?
Mm-hmm. We are. There's so many facets to this. I mean, like you just said, breathing it's fundamental. You don't usually think too much about it.
No.
You generally, I would say, take it for granted.
Absolutely.
And there is so much to it. And I feel like I talk about it an abnormal amount.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I do. Because, and especially if you've been listening, I'm sure you like already know everything I'm going to say today. But it's always fascinating to me, my first meeting with a client, the first session that we go through when I'm working with someone postpartum is resetting the breath.
Yeah.
And retraining the breath. Now, this is also coming from someone who pitifully does not like meditate or do a lot of like that good
but
breath
meditation
stuff,
and breathing go hand in hand, but they have very different functions.
Yes.
And so like we sometimes interchange them, and that's what's the thing. It's like the breath in itself, and again, I'm a yogi, so I'll say the pranayama is part of like yoga, but it's a whole leg on its own. Just like here, like postpartum training, there's a whole, we would say, like module about breath and breathing, which is what you were going to talk about. So like tell us more.
Well, and it's always interesting because it's a frustrating session too. Like, what do you mean we're going to talk about breathing? I know how to breathe. Like, well, do we? Because when you're pregnant and you don't physically have the space to breathe into belly and ribs, maybe you weren't even doing that before baby, but during pregnancy, you certainly can't.
Well, yeah, everything's shoved up into your
right. And so you start breathing into your chest and your shoulders, and you can, I mean, I'm sure you can visualize now, or if you're listening, just take a really deep breath and see what happens. Are your shoulders raising up to your ears as you do this? Like, that's a stressful breath. That's an anxiety, it's not a deep breath. And what we work with clients to do is getting the breath into your belly and your rib cage between the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, which is more of that relaxing breath, that meditative breath, and really engages your breathing muscles, your core,
diaphragm,
and also the lower abdominals, the muscles that you haven't really connected with, or you maybe like you've truly lost feeling with over the time of your pregnancy. So that's always the first thing. In order to correctly engage muscles, we need to first work on the breath, and then the posture, hand in hand, to make sure that breath is working properly.
Well, it all comes down to optimal length. So if your muscles aren't in optimal length, they don't engage the way they're supposed to. And so what's fascinating is, yes, I've worked with a lot of postpartum women and talking about coming after baby because quote unquote it's an injury. So it's like maybe you've stretched those muscles, so we need to get them
Right.
back into the optimal length. What's crazy is during PT school right now, I'm in cardiovascular pulmonary dysfunction class, and we're learning to do tests, and we're palpating breath and ribs and all this. And so it like blew my mind of like, okay, so I've been in this niche of working with
Mm-hmm.
postpartum women, which most of the time we probably weren't breathing most efficiently before
Right.
pregnancy.
Right.
And now it's like this whole new world. I mean, literally, there's a whole field of physical therapy that have to do with breathing. And it was
Mm-hmm.
incredible to
Amazing.
watch all these videos of patients and patient cases of just how breathing really can either create better function, or the
Mm-hmm.
reason why you're seeing a physical therapist is you have dysfunction. Because
Right. Right.
really what we're
Yeah.
talking about when we say relaxing breath, we mean efficiency of gas exchange, which means getting your muscles, getting your organs the
Mm-hmm.
oxygen it needs to function. So if you
Right.
have this like shallow chest breath, which is the
Right.
anxiety breath, right? it,
Right.
it doesn't come and fill the full lungs, and like you create a
Mm-hmm.
bigger see, I just looked it up, but like a bigger like anatomical dead space or physiological dead space where
Yeah.
gas exchange isn't happening.
Right.
And like that blows my mind of like,
Right.
I had a client who we couldn't figure out certain things of like, oh, I'm feeling, tired in the mornings, but I'm sleeping enough. And I was just like, man, I don't know. Like, are you doing your stress and this? And she finally like went to the doctor and realized like through family history that she probably has sleep apnea. And she got this
Mm.
little like thing to open up her mouth so that she could breathe better at night.
Yeah.
And she was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I woke up more rejuvenated. And it was
Huh.
like, ding, ding, ding. Like,
Yeah.
you need breath, and not just any breath, like big,
Maximal
bubbly,
efficiency
yes,
breath.
breath to like really allow your body to function efficiently. And so we talk
Right.
about like postpartum breathing, but you might not ever have a baby, and you might be
Yeah.
like, oh, wait, do my ribs have this like
Yeah.
bigger angle that I need to like
Yeah.
work on getting my ribs down flatter for
Right.
that optimal length? Am I someone who holds stress and has like anxiety, and I have these like short breaths? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. Even with my Stella, if like we bang our knee or if we're feeling stressed, like I'll be like,
Yeah.
breathe with me. And
The
like
breathe.
that
Yeah.
show, like we have our vagus nerve, which this gets like turned on,
Mm-hmm.
where it can help relax our parasympathetic system. So like
Mm-hmm.
breathing, if you are starting to become geeked out by it, like always start with looking at yourself and like how you're breathing and noticing, are you, like you said, Alex, like coming up to
Right.
your ears with your shoulders? Or maybe there was one patient who had like one side of their rib cage can come out but the other
Mm.
couldn't, and so
Interesting.
like you have
Well,
obstruction.
that's also pretty common, like with pregnancy, right? And
Yep.
tightness on one
Yep.
side of the body versus the other, and like the imbalances that you feel. Um, I love,
Exactly.
I've been doing rib mobility with clients so much more recently to like
Mhm.
open up the chest. And if you
Well, we
don't
have
know what that
muscles in
is, because
between. Yeah, like we
yeah,
have muscles in between our
in
ribs. And
between.
so like we can contract them and kind of make them be like chronically contracted. And like rib
Hmm.
mobilization is like creating space and create, if you were watching the video, I'm like rubbing it all up on
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
rib
And
cage,
like putting your fingers between the actual
the trigger
rib
point.
bones
Yep.
and inhaling to actually stretch those little tiny muscles so that they have full function. And I promise you, if you set a timer for like 5 minutes and just go around your rib cage and do this, you will be able to take the fullest, most beautiful breath after doing
Well,
it. It's amazing.
and what I love about it, I'm going to use, I think it's Dr. Sarah Duvall's. She's a physical therapist. We
Yes.
both did her training. And the one I love, the visualization, is your breath should be like an umbrella. It
Yeah.
should open up 360 and have that full deep breath all the way around and then come in.
Hmm.
And whenever people are like, what's the best core exercise I could do? And they always laugh because I'm like, breathing.
Breathe.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, do an S breath, do a sh breath, do a forced exhale till you cough.
Hmm.
You're going to feel that stuff contract. And when you add the breathing to your exercises, it becomes even more challenging or intense.
Yes.
Like I
Yes.
use balloons, right, to
Hmm.
help people kind
Yeah.
of gauge through that intensity. I know I did with you, and it was like
Yeah.
we're the ridiculous people in
Yeah.
the gym, and I'm like, blow up this balloon while
No,
you
I
get
do
this.
balloons with all my clients too. I love it.
So like you got to get creative, and like this takes me to one of the big questions I have, and you just like, I don't know, heavy weightlifting, you see it, it's a very fancy word, and it's the Valsalva maneuver. And
Mhm.
this whole idea of holding your breath. And so I always caution people, because you might read places and they're like, it's the way you lift heavier. It's the one thing you got to do. That's how
My
you get your
pelvic floor
gain.
hurts just thinking about this.
Well, I mean, we talked about this in the one with You Can Pee, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm bringing it up again, not just because of the pelvic floor,
I
but
know, but
because of your arterial system, so your blood vessels. So one of the top reasons why people die is heart disease, right? One of the reasons why we have heart disease is we have high blood pressure, right? Now,
mhm.
there are a lot of different reasons why you can have high blood pressure. So if you're one of those people that is an anomaly or an outlier, this is not for you. But most of us, that blood pressure comes from, having stuff in our arteries or just not healthy arteries. And it's a silent killer. We might not know. All right. So that comes with stress management, sleep, all these things. The thing about the Valsalva maneuver is it shoots up your blood pressure when you're doing that 1 rep max.
Mhm.
So exercise in itself already increases your blood pressure
Right.
acutely, right? In the small
Right.
time. But then over
Right.
time, your arteries, your heart becomes more efficient. So your blood pressure lowers over time. And that's why you're healthier. That's why you have, you can combat diseases and stuff. The thing about holding your breath when you're lifting that heavy weight, this is what I caution to those that hear me. You literally could pop a blood vessel. And if you get a blood clot, you could get a stroke. And so I always keep saying, like, is your ego too big to get that gain that you need to risk yourself of getting really badly injured?
Mhm.
Like, I'm like, check yourself. Check yourself. All right. Because I would rather you take the weight down, exhale
Yeah.
through. And if you really watch the people who are deadlifting or, powerlifting, and they actually know what they're doing, they're not holding their breath the entire contraction or the entire movement. They
Mhm.
take that breath, they hold it for a second to push off, and then they finish that rep. Sorry, your ears are
Mhm.
probably going crazy with my breath just breathing in you. So if you ever find yourself with a coach that's like, no, you need to hold your breath when we do this. I don't know why I sound like that when I do that.
Always, always.
No, it's like my bro voice. Anyway, just remind yourself and say, Sandy said this.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to argue with me, trust me, I have faculty at Northwestern that will agree with me
Well,
that holding your breath and doing the Valsalva maneuver is really not a smart
yeah.
thing.
Well, I think another good point um is that you might not realize you're holding your breath. I think a lot of
Oh,
people
yeah,
do movements and they don't realize,
sure.
and they're not necessarily like getting a,
Trying to gain. Yeah.
you know, PR for their deadlift or something. They're
Planks
not
is a
trying to.
good one. Planks, a
What's
lot
that?
of people, I find people hold
Oh
their breath
yeah.
in planks. And I'll say,
Yeah.
what you doing? They're like, I'm contracting my core. I have to hold my breath. I'm like, oh, well, come down. Let's work on
Yeah.
bracing our core
Right.
and breathing on top of it. Like, you might not
Right.
have that big, deep breath like we do right here, sitting in like,
Right.
but if you're bracing your core and contracting like a plank, you
Right.
should still, like right now, I'm doing it right now. I'm bracing my core and I'm still breathing. I might not
Mhm.
get as full of a breath, but you can
Right.
still breathe.
Right. Yeah,
So
and
breathe.
it needs to be
Breathe.
trained to be able to do that because you can't just like
Yes.
pop into position. But I think so many people hold their breath without realizing they are. So even
Yeah.
if you don't think you are, do us a favor this week. When you do a movement, try to check in with yourself. If it is lifting a weight or if it's, you got like lifting a car seat or a kid or a
Yep.
heavy bag of groceries or whatever, like check in and see if you're holding your breath while you're doing it or if you're exhaling to help, control your core and actually, improve muscle function, improve like that breath is actually helping you improve your strength.
If you're always running 24/7, holding your breath, go, 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 go mode, you're doing yourself a disservice and not coming back to that homeostasis and that
Mhm.
recovery of like, oh, let me take these full deep breaths. So like if you ever find yourself being anxious, like this
Yeah.
is where the power of the breath is incredible. And I
Mhm.
do it with my daughter. She reminds me, like, it's so fun. Like, she sees me get tense and she's like, Mama, breathe,
Yeah.
relax, and
Uh-huh.
believe, and she's like, all right, let's do it
Uh-huh.
together. Inhale, And exhale.
Yeah. And like that, sort of visualization of like holding a child and inhaling so that they can feel, your rib expansion so that they start kind of going with you or mimicking you, even if they don't
Oh, yeah.
mean to or need to. And I mean, I just have to say the way that these episodes have lined up, like with things in my life, are just pretty fascinating to me. But this week in particular has just been, or past 2 weeks, an incredibly difficult time.
Mhm.
And I've had to remind myself a lot to breathe.
Yeah.
And I've had to remind those I love to breathe. And I've given so many hugs this week just to do that, holding someone else's chest close to mine to breathe and remind them, because it's literally been a not one step at a time week, like a one breath at a time
Mm.
week. And it's just never felt so important or pertinent to me to have those single deep breaths and, really checking in to notice when you're holding that tension, because it is just, it's the most powerful tool and it can get you through so
Yeah.
much.
A lot of times, it's fascinating of that power of suggestion or neuro linguistic programming. It's like in hard times, if you're somebody that wants to know how to help people, but you don't really know what to say, like in
Mhm.
places, we all know, if you didn't know, now you know, like I've had a lot of death in my family. And when I hold space for people that go through that, because I've never really liked somebody who's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know. It's just a weird thing.
Yeah.
Like, so then I don't want to say that to somebody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so one of the things I've done, exactly what you said, is like hold
Mhm.
space for them and breathe. And it's
Right.
amazing how, like, when I start slowing down my breath,
Yeah.
the people around me who
Yeah.
are usually
Yeah,
anxious and
absolutely.
stressed match or mimic my breathing. And
Mhm.
that's like where people are like, oh, you have such an energy and calm. And it's
Yeah.
typically comes back down to the breath of
Mhm.
holding that space for yourself. I just got chills of
I
like, and
know, yeah.
others of like, sometimes the best thing you could say is nothing at all and just breathing with that person
Breathing.
and
Yeah.
helping them down regulate their nervous system, help them just find that. I call it the yummy feeling in yoga. Like a lot of people are like, shavasana, this.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it's the breathe, it's the
Yeah.
pranayama, y'all.
Right.
Like that's what it
Right.
is.
Right.
So
Right.
I love that you like felt that. And I love that of like not one step at a time, one breath at a
Mhm.
time, and
Yeah.
just slowing ourselves down and really feeling, like I said, if you're hippy dippy, go for all the feels. If you're more pragmatic, be like gas exchange, like just tell yourself
Yeah.
that, like, you know, there's
Whatever
therapy.
works for you,
Exactly. And like
but
there's whole
feel
therapies
it.
on this and people who do this on a daily. And so you're not, like you can get help, you can get support on breathing, as
Right.
silly as that might sound, but it's not silly at
I
all
think
because
it's,
there's
I
so
mean,
much.
truly a life-changing tool, the
Mhm.
things that we've learned about the breath. So, you know where to find us. Like,
Exactly.
it's not silly. It's not, it is just, it could change your life.
Let's just take the next 30 seconds and just breathe. Ready?
All
Let's
right.
inhale, exhale. Let's see if we can expand that inhale just a little bit more. Expand that exhale. One more deep breath, my friends. We just went from uncomfortably comfortable to all the comfortable feels. I love
I love
y'all.
it. Love you.
Thank you for showing up today. Getting awkward is always more fun with friends. Give us a review, tag us, and share us so we can continue to grow together.
Use hashtag CUPod, letter C, letter U, or tag us. You can find Sandy on Instagram at Sweat and Shine On, and Alex at aj.afterbabyfit on Instagram and After Baby Fit on Facebook and YouTube. We'll see you next time.